hopefully warnings to let young people know that violence is perhaps not the way to go. After 20 years of hard work in 1982, I ruptured a couple of discs in my spine, spent a good deal of time in traction, and saw myself out of hospital and went home crawling around on my hands and knees. I kept crawling over a book of poetry that had been left lying on the floor by one of my sons, and I wasn't a reader. I'd never been a reader, I'd always been a talker. One day, through boredom and the fact I had to be in bed for the day, I flipped the book over and saw it was poetry. And poetry, I'm too tough to read poetry.
Such a fascinating kind of short to watch and to listen to. Just that opening sequence of the man talking about or like retelling of the story. He's such a storyteller, and he's so able to kind of like create this image and keep you on your toes to hear what's going to happen next or what happened next. So from the get-go, I was already intrigued to know what was more like what was going to be explored with this documentary. So yeah, it was just really fun to kind of hear his story and the fact that he kind of does come from a working class and what he wants to do with that, and the fact that he got into poetry and was able to recite one of his pieces was really cool. And it really is very different from the high to middle class poems that does circulate around. So this was really fun to watch. It was from a completely different perspective that I feel like a lot of people aren't used to seeing poems come from too. So yeah, it was just really interesting to listen to, and I'm intrigued to hear more about this.
So engaging. I loved the way that they set up this documentary, which is him telling this very colorful story, this very graphic story of a fight that went down and then another. And so it's this very kind of like shocking start where you're like, whoa, okay, I'm here, I'm interested, what's going on? And we get to hear the discovery of poetry and how it becomes such a beautiful part of this man's life. And you know, I thought it was very endearing how he was quite resistant to it at first. Well, you know, poetry's not for me. That's not tough. That's not manly. But he actually has, and then when we got to hear one of his poems, oh my goodness, like what a knack for words and storytelling and telling an engaging story, which, not surprised, he's very good at that, as we saw from the very beginning of the documentary. But I love that he is tackling big, important subjects, and he's not beating around the bush, and he's really just going for it. And it's very true to his character, or the character that we see portrayed in this film, which is tackling things head on. And I think it's very refreshing. It's very refreshing, and these are the topics that we can't be afraid to talk about, that we can't be afraid to call out when we see it, because that's really the only way that things are going to change and make a difference. And I think he's the type of person that people really stop and listen to. So I'm very glad that he's on this path, and glad that I got to discover him today.
An older gentleman, Geoff Goodfellow, describes in detail stories about violent fights in bars. I love his gritty voice and style. Interesting story about how he had a working class job for many years and then ended up reading and then writing many successful books of poetry. The poetry, however, is not flowery, but rather tough. The stories were inspired by meeting people at his job as a bouncer. Excellent cinematography with lots of close-ups of him and then shots of him reading his poetry in front of rough areas in town. Great job.
Really good subject matter for a short documentary. He just had such presence. I thought that the choice of filming him just straight on camera, no flourishes, no window dressings, no nothing, was a good choice to make, because he just fills the entire screen with his presence and the history that we sense, and we get a few glimpses as the camera takes in his environment, and as we go into the further into the film, and his world widens out, and we get to see more of his surroundings and his souvenirs, what he's kept. It's always interesting to see what people keep around them, what in their story they keep in their environment. So that was fun to get a glimpse into that, and the poetry reading at the end I thought was really well presented also. The locations where he shot, and the editing technique with the jump cuts, and just his raw delivery, just fascinating character. I'm glad I got to meet this man through this video, and I think I might go and try to find some of his poetry. I'm intrigued.
It gave me a new perspective on poetry. When he was saying is like, it's not about daffodils and like fuchsias or whatever. It's like harsh and like real. I was like, that was interesting to me, because like now I'm like, okay, I want to hear these poems. I want to see what he's talking about. And I think that's a unique entrance. There's a unique angle on the art of poetry that I thought was interesting. And also, I like the poem at the end. I like the way that y'all did that in different locations, and the way y'all shot it was like intentionally evoked the emotion that I think the poem was trying to convey. So I thought that was effective, and I think he's a good storyteller. So overall, really good job.
Not everyone looks like what their passions might represent, what their occupations might represent. And I think that's what the subject of this documentary, what a lot of his discussion is about, this preconception that we have. Again, when we think about authors and writers, we think a lot about these middle-class people who write these wonderful books. But what about the perspectives of the lower class? And why shouldn't someone who has worked a 9-to-5 hard labor kind of job also have a love for poetry? These two things do not have to be mutually exclusive to one another. And I think that that's the best point really made across the 6 minutes of this short doc. Aside from being able to display the evident talent that this man has in poetry, the one that he gets to read, the repetition of punch on, punch off, it just really drives home, again, that lower middle class, monotonous, difficult lifestyle that he's trying to articulate. So it's really an awesome piece, actually.